Welcome to the Instituto Cervantes, Tomás, this evening. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so your cultural roots are in the west of Ireland, but you're now based in Catalonia. What brought you there, and how has this journey or different culture influenced your work?
Well, the interesting thing about every culture is that it's unique. Basically, every linguistic culture, every language has its own gods, its own devils. It has its own culture, basically. And to enter another culture, that is to go to live in Catalonia or to live in any part of Spain, and to participate in the life there through the language, is to come into direct sort of contact with this kind of culture. This is enormously important, I think, for the creative artist. I think it's a source of new riches, new insights, new ideas with which he or she can work.
Okay, and your work has been translated from Irish to Catalan and Spanish. What are the challenges you faced during this process? Do you think anything was lost in translation?
Things are always lost in translation, I mean, this is true. But at the same time, they are, because basically, and especially poetry, if you like, the strength of the poetry has to do very much with the emotional kind of content of words, the effective kind of content of words. It's very seldom that you can translate directly from one language into another for that reason, because the effective content of a particular word, or the emotional content of a particular word, has very much to do with the history of the people who speak that language. So therefore, in translation, what one has got to do is to get an equivalent way of expressing the same idea, the same emotional charge, and the words that you choose to do this may be quite different from in the original language. And this, of course, is a creative challenge, and it's in that sense kind of very interesting.
So you've written in various mediums, from magazines and newspapers to short stories and novel and poetry. So which form do you favour and why?
Well, actually, I don't see very much, difference between them in one sense. They're all an act of sort of creativity, basically, whether it's a poem, a political article, or whether it has to do with a novel. Basically, one is choosing words for kind of maximum effect. Using words because, bearing in mind very often the listener or the reader, you're choosing these words. You're actually putting yourself into the boots or the shoes of that audience. And you're trying to somehow, to say it rather cynically, but to manipulate their emotions. You want them to adopt a particular emotional configuration, which you think is good, worthwhile, enriching, etc. So, whether it's politics, whether it's a poem, whether it's a short story, whether it's a part of a novel, it's more or less the same thing.
Okay, so your novel Ceallaig, which was published in 2009, is set in Cuba, and you mentioned earlier, that you spent time there. What inspired this novel? Did you go to Cuba and were inspired afterwards, or did you go there, to do your research?
Actually, both things. I mean, I had been to kind of Cuba previously, but for shorter periods, much shorter periods. What I wanted was a longer period in order to become more familiar with the thought modes, with the way of thinking of the Cuban people, and also to visit the region in which an Irish journalist way back in the actually 1873 had visited kind of Cuba to examine the revolutionaries, the kind of Cuban revolutionaries of that time. To follow in his footsteps and see how he reacted to landscapes and to people, and then to see would it be very different now. So basically, the novel jumps between kind of Cuba 1873 and kind of Cuba now.
Okay, fascinating. So there's many references to mythological characters and even real historical figures, like the one you just mentioned, James O'Kelly, who worked for the New York Herald. And also Victor Jara, the Chilean singer, for example. Is it important to hold on to these stories as part of our heritage? Or, would we lose some part of our identity if these were lost or forgotten altogether?
I think it's already been lost, I'm afraid. Well, certainly as far as O'Kelly is concerned, actually very few people in Ireland know about him, know what he did, nor understood the organisation to which he belonged, the kind of Fenian organisation, and the important role that it kind of played in Irish history. It's very important, I think, that history is important. It's essential. If a people is to maintain its identity, it must have a sort of a set of kind of common kind of cultural reference, historical reference, and obviously cultural as well.
Yeah. And a strong theme that runs through your poetry is the oppression of artists and creativity under various regimes. Are there any struggles that artists or you yourself would face today?
The main struggle that the artists face today is the absence of response. I mean, from the public. He's in competition with other media. If you go back 200 or 300 years, the medium was language, and often through poetry, kind of people learned things about what was going on, etc. Now, this has all been sidelined, and effectively other media, electronic media, obviously television, mass media, right, has really taken over that. So that the poetry has been very much sidelined. Most people don't read it. Most people are bored by it, and this is kind of one of the realities of our time. Now, the consequence of that will be a sort of a monoculture which will embrace in the Anglo-American world all English-speaking peoples. For example, Ireland, Australia, San Francisco, etc. The kind of difference in the culture is getting minimalised. What happens in a situation kind of like that is a loss of riches, loss of other perspectives that would, in many cases, help to solve certain problems and so on. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tomás, for speaking with us this evening. I hope you enjoyed the first day of the festival as much as we did.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.